Hello, my name is Keith. This is part of a series of videos providing reviews of nonprofits, not designed to be a watchdog but to highlight the reasons why people might wish to donate. These videos may save you some time in making decisions about your giving. This one is about the American Red Cross. If you like these videos, please like and subscribe on my YouTube channels, Agency Reviews, that's for nonprofits, Build Your Success, Get Healthy Now, In the World, and also I have one for photos and videos, Keith Heinle Photos and Videos. Clara Barton and a circle of her acquaintances founded the American Red Cross in Washington, D.C. in May of 1881. Barton first heard of the Swiss-inspired Global Red Cross Network while visiting Europe following the Civil War. Returning home, she campaigned for an American Red Cross and for ratification of the Geneva Convention protecting the war injured, which the United States ratified in 1882. Barton led the Red Cross for 23 years, during which time they conducted their first domestic and overseas disaster relief efforts, aided the United States military during the Spanish-American War, and campaigned successfully for the inclusion of peacetime relief work as part of the Global Red Cross Network, the so-called American Amendment that initially met with some resistance in Europe. The Red Cross received its first congressional charter in 1900 and a second in 1905, the year after Barton resigned from the organization. The most recent version of the charter, which was adopted in May 2007, restates the traditional purposes of the organization, which include giving relief to and serving as a medium of communication between members of the American Armed Forces and their families, and providing national and international disaster relief and mitigation. Prior to the First World War, the Red Cross introduced its first aid, water safety, and public health nursing programs. With the outbreak of war, the organization experienced phenomenal growth. The number of local chapters jumped from 107 in 1914 to 3,864 in 1918, and membership grew from 17,000 to over 20 million adult and 11 million junior Red Cross members. The public contributed $400 million in funds and material to support Red Cross programs, including those for American and Allied forces, and civilian refugees. The Red Cross staffed hospitals and ambulance companies and recruited 20,000 registered nurses to serve the military. Additional Red Cross nurses came forward to combat the worldwide influenza epidemic of 1918. After the war, the Red Cross focused on service to veterans and enhanced our programs in safety training, accident prevention, home care for the sick, and nutrition education. They also provided relief for victims of such major disasters as the Mississippi River floods in 1927 and severe drought and the Depression during the 1930s. Second World War called upon the Red Cross to provide extensive services once again to the U.S. military, allies, and civilian war victims. They enrolled more than 104,000 nurses for military service, prepared 27 million packages for American and Allied prisoners of war, and shipped over 300,000 tons of supplies overseas. At the military's request, the Red Cross also initiated a national blood program that collected 13.3 million pints of blood for use by the armed forces. After World War II, the Red Cross introduced the first nationwide civilian blood program that now supplies more than 40% of the blood and blood products in this country. During the 1990s, they engineered a massive modernization of our blood services operations to improve the safety of our blood products. They continue to provide services to members of the armed forces and their families, including during the Korean, Vietnam, and Gulf Wars. The Red Cross also expanded services into such fields as civil defense, CPR, AED training, HIV/AIDS education, and the provision of emotional care and support in the wake of disasters. Since 2006, the Red Cross and FEMA have worked together, helping government agencies and community organizations plan, coordinate, and provide feeding, sheltering, and family unification services for people affected by disasters. The history, though, doesn't address the more modern restructuring of the American Red Cross from local to a regional response. In many ways, this provides a more efficient response to major disasters around the country, but my personal feeling is that this is at the cost of visibility in the local communities. My understanding and my work in disaster response always had always was based on the concept that the disasters are owned locally first, and by regionalizing it takes some of the localized importance away from where the disaster occurs. And more on that in a later video. My own history with the Red Cross was while serving as a missionary in Pierce, South Dakota from 1986 to 1991. I helped establish the new American Red Cross Oahe chapter. It later regionalized and moved to Rapid City, South Dakota. At the time, we deployed to the 1988 Westbury Trails fire west of Rapid City, South Dakota that burned many homes. It was during the development of this chapter that I learned more about the operation of the American Red Cross. One interesting note, while there, we worked closely with our local law enforcement to identify and capture a volunteer who was considered a potential arsonist. The American Red Cross prevents and alleviates human suffering in the face of emergencies by mobilizing the power of volunteers and the generosity of donors. Today, the supporters, volunteers, and employees of the American Red Cross provide compassionate care in 5 critical areas: people affected by disasters in America, support for members of the military and their families, blood collection, processing, and distribution, health and safety education and training, and international relief and development. For biomedical services, they have spent over $1.9 billion domestic disaster services, $472 million training services, $121 million. The coverage area for the Red Cross, for the American Red Cross, is the United States, also including the territories. And it is divided up into 6 divisions, 49 regions, and 233 chapters. Yes, they are nonprofit. Also, in my research, looking up in the IRS website, there are some individual chapters that have their own nonprofit status. Looking at their staff and board composition, overall for on the website for the National Red Cross, American Red Cross, there are 15 staff, and they are diverse. And the board, there are 13 board members, and they also are diverse. The American Red Cross is part of the world's largest humanitarian network with 13 million volunteers in 187 countries. Working together, they help respond to disasters, build safer communities, and teach the rules of war. Each year, they reach an average of more than 100 million people across the globe. Now, regarding waiting lists and services they provide as well, people affected by disasters in America, from small house fires to multi-state natural disasters, the American Red Cross goes wherever they're needed so people can have clean water, safe shelter, and hot meals when they need them most. They respond to an average of about 65,000 disasters every year. 95% of our disaster relief workers are volunteers, and most disasters they respond to are home fires. They do have a home fire relief program installing free smoke alarms, And for hurricane, wildfire, and flood relief, they work in coordination with the emergency operations centers in the affected disaster areas. For support for members of military and their families, they provide emergency communication services, financial assistance, information and referral, deployment services, veteran referrals, and caregiver network. And as far as I can see, there's no waiting list for those services. For blood collection, processing, and distribution, the Red Cross National Blood Product Supply has fallen by more than 25%. Since July 1st, the Red Cross is working with hospitals around the clock to meet the blood needs of patients, but they can't do it by themselves. They need donors like you to help provide this life-saving care. So the way to do that is book an appointment on their website. For the health and safety education and training, they provide online classes and also registration for in-person classes, and you can find that also on their website. And like I said earlier, they provide international relief and development as well. For reporting, because of all the various different types of services they provide, they have multiple reporting methods for each of their programs. Going on to their financial stability, they basically, for their fundraising and revenue services, they receive fees for service, they receive donations, they apply for grants, and they also receive investments. Their financial stability overall is in good standing. Overhead is very good. It's 10% in-kind support from volunteers, which keeps the overhead rate low. One of the things I like to impress on these videos, if I can find that information, is how much does their CEO make. In this case, the American Red Cross CEO's compensation is $859,260. In my opinion, that's a little high. For their agency demographics, employee and volunteer demographics are diverse. They improve outcomes for people with sickle cell disease. They reduce drowning rates in African American, Latino, and Native American communities, battling the climate crisis impacts on those most vulnerable to disasters. Advocate and provide research support for inclusive blood donor opportunities. They enhance community health, and they leverage funds to promote supplier diversity. As far as outcomes go, they serve 20,000 people daily, 60,000 disaster deployments every year, 2.1 million meals are served, 204,600 overnight shelter and hotel stays in 2021. They installed 2 million smoke alarms, and they support military and their families and veterans. As far as transparency goes, their website is organized and transparent. Their website serves as the entry point for training, blood donations, volunteer recruitment and support, and the primary source of information about the services they provide, and also includes social media links. My summary, okay, I have certain questions that I ask and answer for the summary. The first one is this a program or an agency? Red Cross is obviously an agency. The Red Cross is not funded by the government. Its budget comes from donations as well as cost recovery fees that are charged for some services. In certain circumstances, the Red Cross does receive government money because the government has contracted the Red Cross to carry out some aspect of relief efforts. Because it is a nonprofit charitable organization, the Red Cross is tax exempt. The Red Cross is not completely independent of the United States government, however. The organization runs under a congressional charter that has been in place since 1905. Under this charter, the Red Cross acts as an instrument of the government, carrying out the duties and responsibilities of the Geneva Convention and other tasks that the federal government delegates to it. In other words, the American Red Cross serves as an unfunded government mandate. The Federal Food and Drug Administration monitors the Red Cross's blood collection and storage programs. Is there a return on donor investment? In my opinion, it depends on the services they provide. For the biomedical services, absolutely. For domestic disaster services, I think consolidating and regionalization affects their response to communities. I understand the need for regionalization, but it conflicts with the concept that disasters are owned by the local community. Also, I feel like a few days in a hotel, even though it does help, does very little to relieve a victim of a house fire. For the training services, yes, definitely strong return on the donor investment. Do the funds serve the agency or the client? Well, in this case, both the agency and the client. Some funding goes to agency staff and operations. Some is provided as dues to the regional office, and some are used for direct assistance to clients. Is there mission creep? No, there's not. As far as political influence goes, yes. American Red Cross goal is to create, through effective legislation and regulatory initiatives, a public policy environment at all levels of government that will forward the mission and strategic objectives of the American Red Cross. ProPublica is a website that it does reporting on abuses of power by different organizations. ProPublica has several articles reporting on abuses of power and betrayals of the public trust by the American Red Cross. Issues present. What I've seen myself and I think is something that needs to be mentioned here is that the American Red Cross does exploit major disasters for fundraising purposes. I learned that is actually their primary fundraising plan, to ask for money during and immediately after a major disaster. Each charter also pays dues to the state or regional office. And due to regionalization, and this is a concern that I have, is their deployment to major disasters is selective and limited. There are many more players providing a much more organized response to major disasters. Some of them provide an amazing structure for deployment and the use of volunteers. The Latter-day Saints Helping Hands program and Team Rubicon are two examples. My recommendations are more disaster programs and agencies are rising to meet the needs of major disasters. It's a very competitive field now, and there are some excellent programs that are responding to the disasters around the country. Some of their programs at the Red Cross continue to be viable for support, including the training, the military communications, and their blood drives. But I recommend doing research locally in your own community to determine just how effective the Red Cross is in your community. Other organizations might be better equipped to serve depending on the situation. So at that, I would ask you, if you want to see more reviews, please hit like and subscribe, and you have a great day. Thank you.